Kirchhoff's laws, sometimes referred to as Kirchhoff laws, are two of the most fundamental circuit laws. Specifically, they're Kirchhoff's current law, or KCL, and Kirchhoff's voltage law, KVL. And I'll go through the details of each one of them in separate videos. But for now, I just want to know, why do we need them? So I'll return back to this circuit that we've seen before. In this particular circuit, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 elements. And of course, typically, if we're asked to solve this circuit, you would be asked to compute, well, let's figure out the current going through this particular element. I'm going to call it I1. Maybe the voltage through this particular element, I'll also call it V1. And this second element, which is a resistor, I'm going to call it I2. And maybe it has a voltage as well, and I'll assume that V2 looks like that. And the last resistor, maybe it has an I3 in here. This is the current going through it, and this particular one is a V3. And of course, we have the voltage source, so I'm just going to call it Vs. I know the direction and the polarity, or the polarity and the value of this particular source. But what I don't know is the current across it. So if I just enumerate all of these voltages and sources, you will see that each one of the elements will have two. For example, the first resistor has an I1 and a V1. The second one has an I2 and a V2, and the third one has I3 and V3, and of course we have an I'm going to call it IS, and a VS. So we have 4 different elements. Each one of them has one I and one V, so we have 8 different variables. Of course, some of the variables we already know, so we can just knock off. We don't need to compute because we already know. And specifically what we know is, let me just highlight it in here. We know the V of S. Because it's given to us, because it's a voltage source in here. We know that it's 20 volts. Do we know anything else? At this point, we don't, but we know that Ohm's law will tell me if you know the voltage or the current across one of these resistors, you can figure out the other. Because just as a reminder, Ohm's law tells me V equals I times R, plus minus, depending on passive sign convention. But the idea is, if you know the current, you will have the voltage, or vice versa, because we already have all the R's. So technically, I can knock off this V, and this V. All right, so that leaves me with 4 different unknowns, and this is I1, I2, I3, and IS. So I need to write additional equations, because Ohm's law is not enough to write equations to figure out these 4. So I specifically need 4 more equations because I have 4 unknowns. KVL and KCL will come to the rescue and will help me write these equations, and by solving these equations, I'll be able to figure out all the I's and V's throughout the circuit.